Teachers of Reddit, what's the most immature or unprofessional thing you've done because you didn't like a student? When I was teaching, disruptive kid got his PSP out during class one day. I naturally confiscated it until the end of class. Then he did it again and again. During this semester, kid had several written reprimands and was on thin ice with his parents. Around the 5th-6th time he did it, I told him I was forced to write him up for it. He begged me not to, so I didn't. And I took the PSP home and played Lego Batman that night. And the next night, I kept it for a week I think. He never took it out in class again. You should have deleted his saved games. Moved up a fun and tasty lab 3 minutes after I booted my worst ever student. He missed SMOR's stoichiometry and chemistry. Tough luck, Jesse. Science B. I once caught a student turning in essays I knew her mother was writing, and then her mother blatantly plagiarized an essay as an opportunity to make up the assignment for a 50% grade. The student, i.e. mother, had to write a 10-page essay with 15 academic sources. The original was a 3-page essay with 3 sources. I knew the mother would slave away at the thing, and she did. I can't stand parents like her. I don't know that he didn't like her, but my teacher had a pretty funny reaction for one of my classmates in middle school. She would not stop whining and it was starting to get really annoying. The teacher casually went over to his desk, said he had something for her, and flung a tiny object right into her lap. It was a baby's pacifier. The whole class lost it and fortunately she took it pretty well. The whining eased up for a while after that. For some reason I was expecting a tiny violin, but that's even funnier. Kid was as a sociopath. Would purposefully do things to hurt other kids emotionally. Lied constantly, including to his mother in front of my face, and when called out on it, the mom laughed. She always defends his shittiness. Kid even accused my amazingly patient, super sweet friend of slamming him against a wall the year she had him. Anyway, in 17 years of teaching, he is the only child I have even remotely come close to hating. After several months of his awfulness, I started waiting for days he was absent to do extra special lessons and activities that were extremely fun, just so he'd miss out on them. Then when he came in the next day, I'd have the kids write in their journals what they learned about and what they enjoyed about the activity, just so he would know he missed it. You probably Pavloved your other students to connecting him to boring days. This crap is impressive. I didn't mind the student, but his parent wouldn't return some forms I needed signed. It was his IEP which was made at their request, so the fact that they wouldn't sign and return it so he could receive the services they were convinced he needed drove me mad. Now, someone had donated some kazoos to be given as treasure box prizes, which I had laughed at and put away. However, I decided this kid deserved to have a kazoo. I put yet another reminder slip in his homework folder and sent him home with a kazoo, with full permission to tell his parents exactly who he had gotten it from. The IEP was returned signed the next day. Oh dang, that's right. Been so stressed I forgot about this form. I like your new kazoo, buddy. Had a kid steal my pen once. Kids at my grade level don't use pens yet, and the pen was the exact same brand, style, and color that I always use. I teach in a small school and no other teacher uses that exact pen. Kid said that he found it in the hallway. Little crap knew that I couldn't prove that he stole it, so I just ignored him and went on with the lesson. Fast forward 10-15 minutes and I hear a shout from him. He had been chewing on the pen and it leaked all into his mouth. He then tries to wipe it out using his brand new shirt. Shirt gets completely ruined. I couldn't help but laugh at the ridiculousness of the situation. His sister is a year younger than him and couldn't wait to tell me the next day that the boy got his rear end tore up for ruining his new shirt. For the next month or so, whenever he didn't have a pencil, I would offer to let him use one of my pens. He never took me up on the offer. You may have inadvertently cured his oral fixation. On the other hand, I have been teaching Asia for a while now. This was during my 3 years in South Korea. I had this class of 3 middle school boys. It was one of my favorite classes, but they could be little shitheads sometimes. One day they wouldn't listen or work. They kept speaking Korean, not allowed in my class, and one kept throwing eraser bits at my face. So with 15 minutes left I gave them the silent treatment. I just opened my schedule and made random notes. At first they just started drawing on the board and having fun, but soon they were scared and tried to get my attention. When the bell rang I grabbed my stuff and left. The next time I taught them I walked into class and they had written "Sorry Rabbi Wimp's teacher" on the whiteboard and were all bowing to me. It was adorable and I miss that class. My high school Spanish teacher did something like that once, except for leaving at the end of class, because it was her classroom and there were more periods in the day. The class felt super guilty after a few minutes. I once told a group of high school kids that if they stopped coming to class I would pass them. These kids, about 5 of them, did nothing all year and made teaching this class impossible. They would play music and have conversations throughout the whole class period. Calls home, referrals to the dean. Failing grades did nothing to change their behavior. It was about 2 weeks before they took me up on my offer and they missed the last 5 weeks of class. I still failed those suckers. Yay for happy ending. Mom was a history teacher. Get a new student mid-year from Mexico named Alberto. Tried giving him schoolwork assignments. Call on him. He always replied no sir, which means I don't know in Spanish. Frustrated by weeks of this, my mom vents to other teachers on her team about how the kid could possibly get a grade if he can't speak English, and they are all stunned. Mrs. XXX, Alberto speaks English. He's been fooling you. Embarrassed, she gives him an assignment the next day and he pulls the same stunt. No sir. She takes a giant red marker and draws a huge F on his paper that takes up the whole page. Looks him in the eye and says, "Do you comprehend now?" Rest of the year he was an A student in there. That's some Peggy Hill level Spanish. I remember my 3rd grade teacher screaming at the top of her lungs, "I don't get paid enough for this," because a student she was working one-on-one with wouldn't listen. I mean, she's not wrong. Wasn't because I didn't like him, but was just annoyed in the moment. I was doing the admittedly annoying thing of holding up the class to wait for the stragglers to get their crap together. A kid at the front of the line said something along the lines of, "If you make me miss my bus, I'm gonna whoop you." Instead of writing him up, reprimanding, or ignoring him, I just turned to him a bit and said, "Really? You think you could take me?" He was very small for a 5th grader. I was 6 feet 0 inches 220. I just read through all the stories of people who killed people, so I keep expecting the stories to end with a teacher killing a student. So far so good in this thread. Me too. When I was growing up in a shitty neighborhood we had this one teacher who was friendly when he wanted to be and a tank when he wanted to be. My school had a lot of fights often, but if he was around you didn't fight. One kid though was a little crap, constantly shooting spitballs, constantly causing problems in class, and thinking back to it, if he wasn't in the class everyone could have gotten an A guaranteed because half the lessons were stopped to deal with this kid's problems. Send him to the office? He'll just say no and cross his arms smiling thinking he was untouchable. 2nd year of high school, he was in my math class with the brutal teacher. He tried pulling the same crap there. Teacher flipped out, opened the door and told him to get his scrawny butt to the office or he'll drag him there himself. The kid just kinda froze up saying, "I'll tell my mom." Teacher just shouts in his face, "I'm fricking your mom." The kid walked away. Turns out the teacher was fricking his mom because they are now married. Also the kid is in jail for rape and running over his own kid with his car. That was quite the twist end. Student was a class A dong. Okay, maybe not A, but B at least, or B. I was teaching assistant support staff. He was being a scrawny crap and made some yo mama style joke. I said she had died. Threatened to tear up and walk out. I spent the whole freaking day ignoring and not talking to the crap, trying my hardest to look upset at every turn. Right at the end of the day his friends come and say he is sorry, and scared. I tell them I don't care. I see him as I leave and he is clearly really upset and not happy, and comes and says sorry about what he said and he didn't mean it. Recently, I heard a conversation between 2 boys. "Your mom is gay. A pile of ashes can't be gay." My dad, who was a history teacher, was a pretty laid-back teacher, popular with the students, who usually did well in his class, though, because this was a school dealing with some of the more disadvantaged and problematic areas of the city. He was experienced with pupils being dongs and calling him names. It's an all-boys school. He could take it in the classroom, and of course would tell the pupils off in the right way. He very rarely raised his voice. One weekend, my dad was entering his house when one of his pupils saw him and called out, "Hello sir, UW." My father marched across the street, grabbed the boy by the lapels, slammed him against the wall and said, "You can't call me that in school. You certainly can't freaking call me that in the street." Needless to say, the boy never called him that again. Punch them in the neck. Hear me out. Not a traditional teacher, but a self-defense instructor, was running a class on defense versus knives. One thing you have to accept: if you are in a knife fight, you almost 100% will be cut. Anyway, the drill was this: each student paired up with a partner and had to parry block the knife wielder for 2 minutes. I jokingly said anyone who makes it 2 minutes gets to teach the next class. I've got about 18 students. The drill goes on, and at the end, I ask if anyone didn't get cut at all. One guy, younger, maybe 18-19, who was a kind of problem student, raises his hand. This is a kid who always questions everything. Nice enough, but kind of a jerk. Now, his partner for the drill was an older guy, slower, and this kid was in good shape, so I could see where he might have been fast enough. Okay, I tell him, taking a rubber knife, let's see. When he is ready, I come at him, and it takes all of 3 seconds before I slashed him across the midsection. This is fine. I hand him back the knife, and say something like, "Not bad, but have your partner speed it up next time." I turned around and heard him say, "I bet you can't do better." I turned back and he rushed me. Several problems here. 1. Don't just randomly attack students. 2. Definitely do not attack your instructor. It's pretty disrespectful. He lunged at me full force. Rubber or not, these knives are pretty solid and can hurt. I blocked, and on pure instinct, full force punched him in the neck. He dropped, coughing. Now, since they weren't actively working, my entire class saw this. I felt terrible, but most of my students started clapping. I helped him up, and whispered, "Don't ever pull that crap again." He nodded, and at least seemed embarrassed. Never had another problem with him. Good kid, just was out of line. One of the better descriptions I heard for knife fight was, imagine you are in an all-white suit, head to toe. Now imagine that your job is to take a red Sharpie with no cap away from a toddler who has just been given their first Mountain Dew. What you're imagining that white suit looking like afterwards is about what you can expect your skin to look like after a knife fight. I work in a pre-K class. I've been told that students are normally fairly good, but I don't know from experience, as this is my first year teaching and we have multiple students with severe behavioral issues. Recently, one of our students was throwing a big tantrum on the floor, kicking, screaming, biting, spitting, you name it. So after over an hour of it, I finally said, "That's how you think we act in the classroom? Fine. I get to act that way too." Before the student could respond, I dropped to the floor and started kicking and screaming. It stopped their tantrum, and I didn't have any issues with them the rest of the day. I'm big in rewarding the positive behavior and good grades in my class. I for sure don't believe in rewarding the misbehaved students just because they were good for 5 minutes. I use class dollars and a treasure box. A's get $20, B's get $10, and 75-79 get $5. After a test, I'll hand out the money, and one day a week, I'll call kids to do treasure box. Treasure box is $20. I have one student that is such a pain, but will magically be an angel once he sees something he wants from the treasure box. Kids know I only call the quiet students who have been doing their work all day to go first. I heard him talking about this one item he really wanted. I purposely called him last so that item was taken. Felt good. John was a class clown and constantly disrupted lessons. Does stupid things like shouting how he can see a classmate's bra through her uniform out of the blue, or stand up making monkey noises. But it was a public secret John had a huge crush on the girl sitting in front of him, constantly playing with her hair, etc. Girl complained she couldn't see the board well one day. I moved her to the front row and kept John at the back. FKU John. I don't think that's unprofessional at all. Not me, but my husband, who was helping to chaperone a field trip to the zoo with first graders. Since no parents signed up, we were having a bathroom break, and I was still with the girls and the boys were waiting at the tables outside with my husband. One of the boys saw my husband's phone and demanded it from him. This is how the conversation went. Boy, gimme your phone. Husband, number. Repeat 3x. Boy, why can't I see your phone? Husband, because it doesn't belong to you. Boy, my dad says if someone doesn't give me something, I should snatch it from them. Husband, your dad is an idiot. At first, I was worried because I'm the teacher, but part of me was like yes, the boy was a brat to the max, mean to other kids, cry when they would react meanly back, thought he was better than others, and did not ever understand the consequences of his actions. He thought everyone was being unfair to him. He was older, bigger and dressed cool, so a few kids looked up to him and he was even mean to them. Of course, it is not all his fault, even if he did something blatantly in front of me. Facebook stalking his mother proved to be more than interesting. This type of kid is the freaking worst. Like every time I see their parents I feel so bad. They just look so tired and dead inside. I was a volunteer assistant teacher for first graders like 7 years ago when I was in high school. I had one student who was one of the smartest in the class but was also really mischievous and kinda mean. My favorite kid by far. Sorry in advance that this doesn't exactly answer the question cause I didn't dislike the girl at all. She was always doing stuff like trying to read out of the book I was holding while I was giving her a makeup test from that book. Not that she needed to cheat, but just to be a little crap. One day, since my seat was the table behind her at the back of the room, I just started taking her unused pencil and just hiding it behind me whenever she'd look away. It went on for about an hour until she was digging through her pencil case in confusion and looking under her desk cause she knew she had to have been writing with something but her stuff was just magically disappearing. It didn't take her long to realize it was me and she turned around and was absolutely livid, so I just smiled and gave her back a bundle of like 10 pencils. So close to a glitch in the Matrix story 10 years from now. I was the class clown. Tech decks were starting to be a thing. 7th grade math teacher thought they were annoying and banned them. I had about 12 of them and didn't care if he took one away here and there. He found my stash and took all of them apart and kept the screws. Guy was a savage. Semi-unrelated, but this reminded me of a story my mum told me once. She used to teach science at high school in low-income area schools. She had this one class at a school that was particularly bad. Lots of kids skipping school, smoking drugs starting at the age of 12 behind the school at break times, loads of terrible behavior and bullying. You get the picture. Despite all of the crap she put up with and dealt with from students, including one throwing an entire desk at her, she had this one crap brain. Satan spawn little toe rag who made her whole life heck. He would verbally abuse her daily, consistently lie about beating up younger kids, never did his homework, drew dongs on her desk and left moldy food in the cupboards, stole her phone, twice, and was just an angry young man. She's had lots of experience in social work and in teaching and has more compassion than the rest of my family put together, so she tried everything to try and understand and work with this boy, but nothing worked. Eventually she resorted to calling in the boy's father, something she had tried to do by issuing the boy with a slip of paper that unsurprisingly never reached home. Getting permission from the head, asked her to directly contact the boy's family. A meeting was set up. So the day of the meeting came. My mum was rather apprehensive as an alarmingly large, heavily scarred man walked in and sat down across from her, dragging his son behind him. My mother began to calmly explain all of the things the boy did regularly in class, leaving out the worst of it. Apparently the father sat silently nodding his head as she spoke and never making eye contact with her or his son the entire time. The boy was denying everything with what mum described as a slightly panicked voice. At the end of the meeting the man got up, thanked mum and left. The boy wasn't seen at school for 4 whole days, and when he finally came back he was covered in bruises. The boy never hassled mum again, but I think she carries rather a lot of guilt from the whole situation. TLDR, my mum called the boy's father to come in after a lot of struggle. The boy came back to school a week after the meeting with many bruises. He never bothered her again. The father sat silently nodding his head as she spoke and never making eye contact with her or his son the entire time. This is just a post, but I could feel that tension. Dang. I taught middle school for 7 years and dealing with 8th graders can be a bit trying. I had this one male student who whined about everything. Every assignment, project, lecture involved some level of whining from this particular kid. He was a good-looking football jock who was just lazy when it came to academics. At some point while he was being particularly annoying, I looked at him and said, "Settle down, Francis." Not his real name, and if you've ever seen the movie Stripes you'll recognize the line. It was immediately obvious that the name bugged the crap out of him. From that moment forward I started calling him Francis on a daily basis just to irritate him, and he hated the name. I told my wife about it, who was his math teacher at the time, and she started calling him Francis as well. Soon all of his peers at school started addressing by Francis as well. I got such joy hearing people walking down the hall yell out, "Hey Francis," and seeing the irritated look on his face every time he heard the name. I have a million other stories on how I subtly fricked with irritating students over the years, but that is one of my favorites. That's amazing. I would love to hear some more of your stories. Not me, but father, semi-verbatim. He was subbing for a special ed class. Student was late to class. Policy is to give a tardy slip. He argued, refused to admit he was late, continued to argue as he handed out that day's assignment to the point where he had to address the outbursts. Finally, he had no choice but to write him up, which made him angrier. Pushing him to lose my cool, he said, "Do you want me to write down on the referral, so and so is being a jackass?" A kid, to his credit, came back instantly with, "I don't know, can you spell jackass?" To Dad's credit, he immediately responded, "Of course I can spell jackass. I'm not the one in special ed." Tardy slip to special ed. Hey, you're now extra tardy. I was the student. I went to a weird art program that was in a block of buildings on the campus of a regular public high school for my first semester of 9th grade. I had a drawing teacher that made my life a living heck. Class started at 6:30 AM and every goddamn day was spent with him laying into me. My friends who were also in the program, as well as the life drawing teacher, noticed that he was unusually hard on me, but nothing was ever done. He'd tell me my work was garbage. Any compliments about my work were backhanded. He'd raise his voice. He'd tell me that I should quit. So I did. It drove 13-year-old me to give up art. Fast forward to the end of senior year and I'm a student at the regular old public high school the art program was at. I get a message in my homeroom that I need to go to the art academy block by that drawing teacher. He took me into his office, sat me down, and started crying. "I'm so sorry. My wife and we had a baby to save the marriage. Between the baby and the early morning class time, I was so tired and angry and I took it out on you. I don't know why it was you, but it was etc, etc. I just kinda said what's done is done and went back to class, but man, that was by far the most unprofessional thing I'd ever encountered. If I were vindictive, I would have gone to the principal or something, but I didn't. Instead, I just gave up on art. That's just so rough, man. No one wins in this scenario no matter what happens. This is a prime example of why we should never contribute to bad energy, for lack of a better word, to people around, as satisfying as it can be sometimes. I had a student-parent duo I couldn't stand last year. The child was helpless because her mother babied her so much. All year everything I said was wrong. Her daughter was perfectly fine. I didn't know what I was doing because I was a new teacher. The kid literally told me once when she was in trouble that she didn't care because her mom said it was okay to get in trouble in my class because the behaviors I deemed bad weren't actually bad. So the last day of school there was an award ceremony and the mom was pissed her kid wasn't getting an award, so she said she wasn't going to send her to school. I told all the kids if they didn't come to school that day they wouldn't get the amazing gifts I was giving out and their memory books. There was no amazing gift. It was a bag of junk. I just wanted to force her hand because the principal of the matter. She showed up. She's actually not returning to my school next year. Apparently the problems with her child are the fault of the school, not her parenting. Late to the party, but when we put student work on the bulletin board we would mount it onto a piece of construction paper first. When I had a really annoying kid, I would write expletives on the construction paper with Elmer's glue before putting the paper on top of it. My clear, dried out, hidden secret. Well, When I was in a steel drums class my sophomore year in high school, we had a problem kid in the class who was an immature little crap to say the least. One day, little crap brought a sub from Subway to class for lunch. When the teacher jokingly said, "Can I have some of it?" little crap shoved the whole thing down his pants. The teacher just responded with, "At least you have 6 inches in your pants for once." Beautiful. I work as a teaching assistant in grad school at a very expensive private university. Most of the students I've talked to are great and care about learning, but a few are entitled. One such student demanded to know why she got a low grade on her paper and why there weren't more comments. I didn't think was such a big deal, so I explained it was because we were in a big class. There was only one other Tay, and we each spent about 10 hours on grading the lab reports. Big grade, we wouldn't have time to do all of them. She got angry, sent me a bitchy email about getting better feedback, and then asked what the professor would have given her. It was extremely rude and made me feel upset, so I had the professor regrade it, and he gave her the same grade. The second time around, with the follow-up lab report, I gave her an extreme amount of editing, picking out every wrong detail, error, etc. I didn't give her an unfair grade, but it was lower than the first one, as I found more mistakes than I would have skimming. Then I had the professor grade it, and then I sent it to her directly. She had no choice but to say thank you. I would tell my students if they thought their project wasn't graded fairly they could write a paragraph saying why they thought the grade wasn't correct. I told them I would regrade the whole project and might catch other mistakes I missed when I graded them quickly. The grades almost always went down and I'd have another teacher check the failing ones just to prove it wasn't bias. A friend of mine was a shop teacher who had a kid who was a first-class butthole. The kid did something and he punched the kid. Kid goes running and my friend starts packing up all his personal belongings. The kid's parents are called to the school and they all meet. He told them what the kid said. In the end the parents decided he deserved to be punched and asked the school not to fire my friend. Shockingly he kept his job but was warned that another infraction would lead to him being fired. He worked another couple of years until he qualified for his pension and then retired. As a camp counselor, I had this little crap in my cabin, constantly moaning about having to brush his teeth, take a shower, do activities that he chose and signed up for, etc etc. I felt so crappy because all I was having to do was nag him all the time. Then on the last night during dinner, he turns to me and says, "You know, Scarlet Ladder, you're not my favorite counselor." To which I said, with the cheeriest smile I could muster, "It's okay, insert name, you're not my favorite camper either." Not the most out there thing on this thread, but dang it made me feel good. I was kind of an butt in high school. I came to the US as a refugee, and I had a lot of anger issues and depression. Being obnoxious didn't really help me. After a while one of the TAs started telling me that I'm one of his favorite students from Bosnia. Well, the fact is I was the only student from Bosnia in my high school, so that was his way of telling me he couldn't really stand me. Not a teacher, but witness this firsthand from 6 inches away. Jim was the biggest and oldest 7th grader in school. He'd been held back but still abnormally large and dense. D student, always disrupting class, always using his size to bully everyone. You all know Jim. This is 1987 and Jim's favorite game's a pencil break and this stupid X game where if you draw an X on someone's arm with your finger, and they don't immediately wipe it off, the drawer of the X gets to punch said X. Teacher saw Jim, who was sitting next to me, drawing an X on a kid. Teacher sneaks up behind me, beside Jim, and punches him hard before he has a chance to frog the kid he X'd. In front of the whole class, Jim not only got a taste of his own medicine, but got visibly teary and did a poor job hiding his pain. It was glorious. I don't recall Jim X'ing anyone again. Jim X'ing. He was our foreign exchange student from Shenzhen, and my friend. We played ping pong with him cause no one wanted to teach him. Ping pong as in he'd have one of us teach him 1 month, then someone else would teach him and so on. Crop dusting. I almost always have a ready supply of fuel. Pee me off too much or just spend too much time talking and ignoring the work, and people will begin to wonder what that smell coming from your area is. Of course, you have to master the SBD first. Messed up and let it be audible once. Fortunately, the kids thought the teacher farting was hilarious and I played it off as unintentional. Kid I farted at was grossed out and out of his seat like a shot, which was a totally acceptable outcome. I was a student who was always quiet and respectful. I normally got great grades, except for C's in Spanish class because it wasn't my strong suit. Towards the end of the year, probably had less than a month left before summer, she gave us a choice of options for an assignment. I chose to cook a Spanish meal for my family. All that was needed was a note stating I cooked a meal with my parents' signature on it. So my mom literally wrote 1 or 2 sentences and signed it. When my teacher returns our assignments, she gets to my desk and condescendingly whispers to me, "AWW, you had your mommy do your assignment for you." I was utterly stunned. I didn't have anything against this teacher, never got in trouble with her prior, and I got full credit for the assignment. After this incident I learned people are truly just C. Thinking about it had always rubbed me the wrong way, and it was over 12 years ago. Frick you, Mrs. Curry. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.